While not being classified as one, Kinji Hakari has solidified himself, in my opinion and many others, to be as strong as a special grade sorcerer, at least in Jackpot. And while he may not be able to take down a country due to Jackpot time restrictions, in pure power and speed, he's probably still at that anomaly level. In this video, I want us to go over Hakari's strength and how he would do against the 4 special grade sorcerers, and with me I have Eternal Flame. Would you like to say hello?
Hello everybody, what's up? I'm Eternal Flame. I like to do JJK content, and I'm here to help out with this video on scaling on how well Hakari does against the special grade. Let's go.
Yeah, so we're gonna do this in what we think is the weakest to strongest. It's kind of commonly agreed on that Geto is probably the weakest of the 4 special grades, just due to his kind of lack of scaling. You know, Volume 0, a lot of things were different, but he wasn't, you know, all that strong. Geto, when he becomes a special grade, is pretty interesting because of his curse technique. Obviously, he's amassed a bunch of cursed spirits that he can use in this fight. You know, he has the staple centipedes or whatever, and then some other weird cursed spirits that can create illusions and stuff. So it would be an interesting fight to see how it would go against Hakari. The problem I have with Geto is that we don't know if he has a domain, right? In Volume 0, things weren't very fleshed out, and it didn't seem like he had a domain. He never, you know, tried to use one or whatever. And we only see the one Kenjaku uses, which is, you know, not Geto's. So in terms of like a domain clash, one probably wouldn't happen. But even if it did, we know that Hakari is very strong at domain clashes. It's not explicitly stated in the Viz translations because we know, you know, Viz likes to mess up a lot. But in the Japanese, it does say that he's very strong in tug-of-war battles. By the way, we're going to do this like he starts in base, but he uses, you know, domain in the fight.
Yep.
If we're going to like who would win inside of Hakari's domain, I don't know. It'd probably be Hakari, honestly. Hakari's pretty good at hand-to-hand combat. He was losing to Kashimo in hand-to-hand combat in his domain, but it wasn't like a complete blowout. He was able to kind of keep up, like just a little bit.
And like Geto, his scaling is just overall really weird because like his best scaling is to like what Yuta Kotsu in Volume 0, who that Yuta, like his best scaling is just scaling above the people in Jujutsu High, which gets him really nowhere.
Yeah, they weren't that strong at that point in time, so it really doesn't get him anywhere, honestly. And then once Hakari hits Jackpot, it's basically over. We know it's basically confirmed that even though it's like a chance-based ability, Hakari usually hits Jackpot, you know, no more than 30 times, I think he says. So once he hits Jackpot, it's a complete boost in power, speed, and everything. Jackpot Hakari has pretty interesting scaling, definitely above Volume 0 Yuta. Geto was basically just keeping up with Volume 0 Yuta, but when he got his Rage Amp, you know, he beat him, whatever. But if it's coming to like Hakari, he's just on a different playing field. It's a different level.
Like, to put even more into that perspective, right? Like, Yuta right now in modern day is considered much stronger than Yuta was back in Volume 0 due to the entire narrator statement of Yuta being able to regain the rank of special grade within 3 months, and then he gets even stronger from that point onward. And then Yuta is already like implied to be relative to Hakari, and that's just the same Yuta that's already above Geto. And like, I know there's gonna be some people who are going to say, oh, Geto would have won against Yuta, as Kenjaku had stated, but that's only really talking about the maximum Uzumaki if he was putting all 6,000 curses into the maximum Uzumaki.
Yeah, it doesn't scale up his speed or like, you know, power and like strength, punching strength or whatever. It just scales up his power with the maximum Uzumaki, which would mean it could beat like a Rage Ant Rika. But in speed, he's kind of lackluster. He's not able to keep up with people like Jackpot Hakari. It's simply not happening. So with that, Geto is probably losing, just due to his lack of domain and speed. Next up, we have Yuki, which is pretty interesting because she also kind of has a lack of scaling, I'll be honest. She kind of got violated by Kenjaku. You know, with her only fight being Kenjaku, it's kind of hard to scale her. She doesn't really scale to Kenjaku. Kenjaku was keeping up with her and Choso at the same time. Do you have anything to say about that fight?
My opinion about that fight is, like, I think Yuki is a bit stronger than what the fan base make them seem because of Yuki's entire ability to, like, take off Kenjaku's arms and stuff. But as soon as Kenjaku's actually, like, fully prepared and fully on guard, that never happens again, especially considering Yuki's technique also just has a major drawback where after she takes crucial damage to her, her technique gets massively weaker even after she heals off that damage again, because we never see Kenjaku's arms fall off from those hits.
Yeah. One thing we can say is that a full power Yuki is definitely dealing damage if she connects a shot to Hakari.
100%.
The thing, we talked about this before recording a little bit. The thing with us is that we know that Yuki has a domain, or like I mentioned before, Hakari is very strong at tug-of-war battles. And then if she decides not to use her domain against Hakari, it would just be like maybe she used a simple domain, but Hakari's only sure hit is being able to, you know, give the information to the opponent, so she just wouldn't know anything about the domain. And then it goes into how strong is she, you know, without her curse technique versus Hakari. When we were talking, it was just like, she's very strong with her curse technique. One of her main things is that she's always the same strength unless she's damaged. But then when you take away Hakari's technique, it's kind of like, okay, well, how can she compete? It's maybe she can, punch him, but how strong her base punches, we really don't know. Her speed is also kind of, kind of an anomaly. She only keeps up with Kenjaku, who isn't really having a problem with her. So it's like, once Hakari is jackpot once again, he's probably going to win.
Yeah, there's the damage is going to pile up on Yuki, and it's eventually going to take her out. Because, like, even though Yuki's hits are definitely going to hurt a lot, Hakari is able to survive. He's good enough in hand-to-hand, and he has his domain to his advantage. It will automatically heal him the second he gets a jackpot, and that is when he's going to win.
Now, the next one is definitely the most contentious topic in this video, and it's kind of what I wanted to talk about mostly. It's probably going to be the longest part of the video. It is Yuta versus Hakari. Do you want to talk about it first, or do you want me to get right into it?
I'll talk about it first. Yuta versus Hakari is such a massive argument, and probably the biggest debate in all of Jujutsu Kaisen, all Jujutsu Kaisen fans, right behind Gojo versus Sukuna before that was actually settled. Because there's just so much on both sides, right? Amping up both sides with Yuta's statement of Hakari being stronger than him on a roll in comparison to the narrator stating Yuta is the second strongest behind Satoru Gojo, or second to Satoru Gojo. However, there's translations of it being him only being second in unusual abilities. There's just so much on both sides.
I think what it mainly comes down to is the narrator statement and Yuta's statement himself. I'll first go over the narrator statement. I'll say that just because you're the second strongest in the modern era, it's like you're placing your bets on somebody who's always the same strength versus saying Hakari is the strongest, even when his abilities are chance-based. Like I said this in a previous video where I think that Yuta is most of the time the strongest in the modern era. So they're just not placing their bets on somebody who has a luck-based ability. It doesn't make sense. Who are you going to call someone that is always the same strength, or someone who has a 50% chance of being 200 times stronger? Like, it doesn't make sense for them to make Hakari out to be the second strongest. I honestly think that Hakari is stronger, obviously, due to Yuta's statement, which a lot of people like to disregard due to, Maki stating that it's incorrect. But I think that Maki doesn't know how strong Jackpot Hakari is. Not only is there no evidence for it being the case, there's also the fact that in the Japanese, there's two different ways of translating the kanji. One way is saying that he's better than Yuta while he's in good shape, and the other way is on a roll. So it could be that Maki is interpreting it as the former, which would be in good shape, rather than getting the reference of on a roll, because she doesn't know what his domain is and she doesn't know what his true strength is. So Maki saying that it isn't true isn't really a defeater.
Furthermore, on top of that, to even add more to that of why Maki's statement shouldn't be taken at face value is she hasn't seen Yuta or Hakari for a year by this point. So she is making this assumption based on what she saw in Volume 0 Yuta and current base form Yuta stats. She has no idea how strong Hakari is nowadays. So that statement isn't exactly one that has the most validity, in my opinion at least.
Yeah. So when we get into the base versus base debate, I'll say that I think that they are pretty relative. It's kind of implied whenever Hakari's talking to Yuta when he's going to go out to fight Sukuna with Gojo, and he says that Gojo told him not to come out unless either of them could beat them. It kind of implies that they're on the same level, at least in base, but then I think that when it gets in the jackpot, Hakari's probably going to win. There's multiple reasons for this. I mean, not only does Yuta say it, there's also a jump guide or magazine guide or whatever that says that he's supposed to be stronger than Okosu while he's on a roll. It's kind of the consistency that he's supposed to be stronger. People try to disregard it with feats, like feats over statements or whatever, but there are really no feats to put Yuta above Hakari and Jackpot. The only thing you can say is he's fighting Ryu, has the highest output, but Ryu having the highest output doesn't mean he's the strongest character in the Culling games. We know that, obviously. So it doesn't really make sense for Yuta to be stronger than Jackpot Hakari. He says it himself. He's not really like a humble guy like people like to say. Do you have an opinion on that? I don't like when people try to call Yuta humble. It doesn't really make sense.
Yeah, no. Yuta is 100% not humble, especially when it comes to his own strength in combat. Because, Yuta is not someone who will brag. That is not what Yuta is. But at the same time, Yuta is someone who has absolute faith in his strength and his ability to fight. Because Yuta really wants to be able to shoulder everyone's burdens onto himself. Which is why he wants to get all 400 points. Why he wants to be able to just kill Kenjaku, so Gojo doesn't have to for him. Yuta is someone who is incredibly selfish and confident about his own strength because he doesn't want to have to force others to have to be strong for him instead.
Yeah, I completely agree. There's also a statement in a more recent chapter of Jujutsu Kaisen which Kenjaku says that the number 2 Okosu is especially easy to track. A lot of people like to use this to say that he is the second strongest to Satoru Gojo, which I've already mentioned isn't necessarily the case all the time, but it doesn't make sense for this translation to be correct. I even reached out to the people that translated this at TCB, and when I asked them about it, I got banned from their server with no warning whatsoever. This was my first time messaging the server, keep in mind. And there are previous encounters that I had with them in the past that I've seen that they're kind of biased towards Yuta. They try to imply that Yuta can take a hollow purple from Gojo. They're also the ones that mistranslated the prodigy statement or whatever to make it seem like he was stronger than he was. These people at TCB kind of have a bias towards Yuta, and it's pretty clear. But the way that the statement is actually supposed to be translated is saying that the number 2 is especially easy to track. This makes it a lot clearer that it's just talking about cursed energy rather than talking about how strong he is compared to Gojo. It's saying that he has the second highest cursed energy in Shinjuku behind. Next up, we have the most notorious sorcerer of all time, that being Kenjaku. Kenjaku is thousands of years old and has a body swapping technique, and right now he's probably at the peak of his power, having cursed spirit manipulation and his anti-gravity system. So when it comes to Kenjaku, it will probably come down to a domain clash, in which I think we can probably assume that Kenjaku can expand his domain faster than Mahito and Shibuya. Do you think that, or is that, too big of an assumption?
I think there's enough, like, with Kenjaku's domain mastery and, like, the fact, like, he's called the second best at using barriers in the entire series. I think that's not too big of an assumption, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think if it comes down to a domain clash, it would be open barrier versus barrier, and we come to kind of like a crossroads. If you think that he can break his barrier from the outside like Sukuna did to Gojo, then Kenjaku probably wins, right? He can never get his jackpot off, and he's just in base fighting Kenjaku. But let's say, for the sake of argument, that he does get his jackpot off. Well, how strong is Jackpot Hakari in comparison to Kenjaku? And I'd say he's probably still weaker than him. And the reason I say this is not really based on scaling, because we really have no way to scale the two. But if we go by the narrative, it seems like Yuta is going to be the one to fight Kenjaku. But as we see right now, Yuta doesn't seem to be as strong as Kenjaku, so he's probably going to need help or an amp. And if we're only saying that Hakari is somewhat stronger than Yuta, there's really no way to say that he can compare to Kenjaku, in my opinion.
This is also supported by Kusakabe saying that Kenjaku is a monster as well, like putting Kenjaku on the level of people who need to get jumped alongside Sukuna.
Yeah, I agree. He says that the best chance is for Maki to go sneak attack him, but I don't really know how Maki would take care of him. I don't think it would win. It was just like a one-off idea. But if we're comparing them, like Hakari and Kenjaku, Jackpot Hakari is very hard to kill, but we do know that Kenjaku has ways of stopping reverse curse technique with attacking the neck and whatnot, and he has knowledge to do so. He employs them in battle a lot. So even if he gets Jackpot, he's probably going to get taken out due to Kenjaku's just been amassing knowledge throughout thousands of years. He knows how to stop reverse curse technique users. He'd probably be very surprised at his amount of reverse curse technique, but it's probably nothing he can't stop.
Furthermore, it's also very in character for Kenjaku, unlike Geto, to actually bombard someone with massively powerful curses, as shown against Choso. The only reason he didn't do it against Yuki was because Yuki was an absolute counter to curse spirit manipulation, which Hakari is not going to get the mercy of having. It's not just going to be Kenjaku versus Hakari. It'll be Kenjaku plus several curses that are going to be amped by Kenjaku versus Hakari.
That's even including his Asian god curse spirit, which is called Ganesha. It's able to like obstruct concepts or whatever and get them out of the way or something. It's so crazy. It's an insane concept to like wrap your head around, but it's basically like entangling the concepts of another person's curse technique, and it's able to stop them. Now we know it doesn't work on any curse technique, or else he would just go after Gojo and beat him with that, get rid of infinity or whatever. But if we're talking about techniques like Hakari's, which are inherently linked to domains, it would probably work on something like that. So there are probably two ways that he can actually get around Hakari's domain expansion.
Furthermore, there's also other curse spirits that Kenjaku has that people don't really give him when he actually fights, because he's already released one of them, which is which is the cockroach curse that's fought against Yuta, Kurarushi, which admittedly it's against base Yuta, but it still has some pretty good scaling. It would still be useful support in the fight, especially with Kenjaku amping it too.
Yeah, the main thing about Kurarushi is his, unexpectedness. He's even able to catch Yuta off guard with his life and death sword or whatever it's called. I forget what it's called. Life festering sword, that's what it is. It's basically able to throw out a bunch of insects, and if they come into contact with you, they start eating you inside out. Like, it's kind of insane. So if Kenjaku is fighting with Kurarushi and is able to catch him off guard with this, that's another way of taking care of him.
One of the worst counters for Hakari, especially because he's not limited by time, and it's very in character for Kenjaku to even do this.
Yeah. The main thing is, like, Kenjaku is just a mastermind, right? We know he has thousands of years of knowledge, and he's just been fighting for such a long time, where it's like he can basically deal with anything people throw at him, unless they're like way faster than him or way stronger than him, which Hakari probably is not. The next one we have on this list is Gojo, but obviously we know how it goes between current Gojo and Hakari. Gojo easily wins this battle. So, to kind of make it more interesting, we wanted to go over post RCT Gojo or Awakened Gojo and how he would do against Hakari. And this one is going to be very hard because Gojo and Hakari don't really link to each other in terms of scaling.
Like, Post Awakened Gojo is only just, like, as crazy as what I'm about to say sounds, he's only just massively above, like, Toji and unquantifiable Yuki, because we don't know if Yuki trained in that era. But unfortunately, it's really hard to create a scaling chain between Toji and Hakari. And by extension, it's really hard to create a scaling chain between Gojo and Hakari at that era.
Yeah, there's really no way to link them because they don't fight the same characters. In my opinion, this is a very controversial opinion. I think that Hakari is weaker than Maki and Toji, so I do think that if you can try to scale them to Toji and whatnot, then you could say that Teen Gojo wins. But I think it's more consistent to go off of like portrayal in the narrative, and I think that Teen Gojo just has a better portrayal in the narrative than Hakari does in Jackpot. It's like he's this powerhouse that's been awakened, and he's supposed to be the strongest of the modern era, you know, that's just been newly formed. He's like a seed that was planted, and after fighting Toji, he was able to fully awaken, and he's now the strongest that Toji tried to destroy, right? It's like,
yeah,
when you're born with this innate power that hasn't been shown in hundreds of years, and you're able to use it to the peak of its abilities, even being able to use a hollow purple that not many people know about, it's kind of like you're portrayed to be higher than quite a bit of people, and Hakari just doesn't have the same level of portrayal. He's even compared to Buddha, who's an enlightened god, using his quote and whatnot and being in his pose or whatever. It's kind of like Hakari doesn't have the same thing. He's just a restless gambler, you know?
Yeah. Like, in this arc, this is made to be the arc that shows how Gojo didn't just get stronger than everyone in the era. Just, Gojo got so much stronger that no one could keep up with him. That was the point of Gojo versus Toji. Because while Gojo mastered his powers more and more, started to awaken things like a domain expansion and just got better and better, it was only at this point where no one could rival him and no one could touch him anymore in this era.
Yeah, I agree. So Teen Gojo, even post RCT, he probably still is going to be able to beat Hakari, even if he gets his jackpot off. Now,
yeah,
one other thing I wanted to talk about is, can Hakari reach Gojo's level? And I kind of talked about this a little bit in my other video about, the upcoming era. But I wanted to, confront you about it and see how you think, how strong can Hakari truly get?
In my opinion, I truly believe Hakari, like, a lot of people can reach Gojo's level. It's just about changing their mentality, changing how they think, and I don't think a lot of things are as limited to curse technique, but rather the interpretation of your curse technique and how much you allow that to control the evolution of your curse technique. Which is why I think Hakari is probably like one of the best people in order to become the next Gojo and reach Gojo's level, because Hakari is so non-standard already. It's just about changing more and more about how he thinks in order to evolve himself more and more.
Yeah, I agree. And then there's even the fact that Gojo, every time he talks about, the upcoming generation, he highlights Yuta and Hakari as being the ones who can surpass him, along with Maki and Yuji and whatever. But one thing, people tell me I read too much into it about this. I found that every time that he brings up Yuta and Hakari, he brings up Hakari's name before he says Yuta, which is pretty interesting to me, as like, I do read into things a lot. So I take this as kind of an implication that he has, if not on the same level as Yuta, even higher potential than Yuta. So if Hakari is somehow ever able to be in Jackpot continuously, or have the same strength as Jackpot in his base form, like always, basically, because the only problem now is that it's limited, right? There's a limit to his Jackpot, just like there's a limit to Yuta's Rika. But if he's able to get rid of this limiter with some kind of binding vow or whatnot, he's going to be a powerhouse, and he's going to be one for a very long time.
Agreed. And like, it also makes a lot of sense that Gojo has so much faith in Hakari, because this has been my headcanon for Hakari for a long while, because I truly believe Hakari was the first student ever to justify Gojo's belief and tell Gojo his dream had a possible way of coming true because of Hakari's potential levels. And it just continued to get proven more and more after Hakari.
Yeah, that's interesting. But I think that's all we have to go over today. You have anything else?
Nope, I don't got anything else.
Well, yeah, that's all we have for today. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to like the video and subscribe to my channel. This is how many more Jujutsu content in the future. And also go subscribe to Eternal Flame. Do you have anything else you want to say?
Nope, I'll see you guys all later. Have fun. Have a good day.
All right, yeah, goodbye.